Is Mr. Horowitz there?
Hello, Alec.
Hi, how are you?
Can you see me?
Yeah, we can, loud and clear. Thank you so much for joining us.
Before we get started, Alex, I just wanted to show you. This picture was taken by a photographer, a regular army photographer. When we landed in Algeria, he was there, and I had the print, and my granddaughter enlarged it so I can always look at it. Do you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. Can you bring it a little bit closer for us? Wow, that's fantastic.
I don't look any different. That was 22 hours.
No, yeah, you look. Actually, you look.
I was 22 years old.
I just want to introduce you formally so that we can all know a little bit about you before we begin our conversation, if that's okay. And you can correct me. You can actually correct me right now if you like. You were born on August the 16th, 1921.
Correct.
You're about to be 102. Is my math?
I'll be 102 in 3 months. In August.
That's incredible.
Well, I don't know if it's incredible, but that's the way it is.
What do you have for breakfast? What do you eat for breakfast every morning? What's the secret?
Well, I think my mother lived to 105. I think you've got to have good genes.
Right. Okay. So you joined the U.S. Army as a private first class, Company C, 202nd Engineer Combat Battalion. And you basically went through the entire war in Europe. Am I right in saying that?
Right. Correct. Let me just give you, when I went into the Army, we were draftees. Everybody was a draftee. We were referring to the draft. And there was no formal organization. They formulated an MP battalion. When I went in, it was the 759th MP battalion. And my company was designated as special services. We would do the odd jobs that came up. And I was in Fort Dix for 1 year, at which time we did many little details. The first detail they sent us to as a special services company was in New York, Pier 86, the largest French luxury liner, was designated for a troop transport, right?
Yep.
It was in Pier 86, and it was sabotaged in the pier. And they put so much water into the boat that the boat looked like a beach whale. It turned over completely on us. It was a horrible sight to look at. So they put us on Pier 86 because the Queen Mary was designated as a troop ship, and we were doing guard duty while she was in port.
Could you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up?
Well, I was born in the Bronx, New York.
I would never know from your accent. I would never be able to tell that you were from New York.
Really well. I have a Jersey accent. And my father was in business. It was 1948, Depression years. And the doctor told him for his health, he should move out of the city with his family. And Pop had a friend that had a chicken farm in New Jersey. And he told him it's a very nice way of life. You don't get rich, but you will enjoy
1928.
The life. That was 1928. And
Wow.
I grew up on a chicken farm. I loved it because it was outside. Pop had a farm with 10,000 chickens. So you can picture that. And I went to school. We had a little school. There was 100 people in my graduating class. So that'll tell you how small we were. But it was a beautiful town. It was a revolutionary town, very popular for its revolutionary history.
So can you tell us if you can remember learning about Pearl Harbor?
I remember it very well. We had dances every Sunday in a different community. WPA, are you familiar with what that is?
No, I have no idea.
That was during Roosevelt's time. It was called Works Progress Administration. They had people who were unemployed. If you're a musician, you became part of a band and you went around to the small towns that did not have access to the big city music. And I remember I was at a hotel in Lakewood, New Jersey. We were dancing, and the leader says, I have to stop everything. I have an announcement to make. Pearl Harbor was just bombed. It's incredible. I remember no one said a word. We all left the hall, got in our cars, and went home. And that was our Pearl Harbor Day.
Can you tell us a little bit about your early days in the service, your training?
Yes, I was shipped to Fort Dix, New Jersey, as most of the draftees from New Jersey went to Fort Dix. And in Fort Dix, they trained us for various parts of service, and especially for handling, what do you call it?
Prisoners.
Well, you captured soldiers, how to translate from the soldiers. We had translators, and we learned how to handle prisoners of war. Now, I'll give you the first selection we had. I was in service about 6 months, and they said, we are going, at that point, Rommel, General Rommel, the German general, he was going through North Africa at his own pace. No one could stop him. They were looking for oil. General Eisenhower said there is only one person that can stop him. That's General Patton. So they shipped General Patton with his 101st Tank Division to Africa, and he really chased them right into Egypt. Now what happened, General Patton was capturing many German troops from Rommel's forces. They did not have any World War II, what do you call it, where they kept the soldier, their, what they call it, they captured
Prisons.
the Germans, Rommel's troops. They put them on a boat in Tunisia and shipped them to Halifax, Nova Scotia. That was the first time we had access to finding out what we were in duty for. They put us on a train and we landed in Halifax, waiting for the boat to come in with the prisoners that General Patton caught. They did not have facilities in Africa. There was another Canadian military organization, and they took the prisoners off the boat and shackled them and put them on a train. We went on the train with them, and we were going to escort them to El Paso, Texas, where they had built a prisoner of war camp. And that was our first learning how to handle PWs. We were on the train. Rommel's troops were the cream of the German army. They were tall, blonde, husky, blue-eyed soldiers. And the first association I had with them, we had them on a train. They were shackled at their legs. Two of us at a time would walk through the train to make sure everything was in order. And when the German soldiers, their prisoners, who were tall, blonde, I was walking through the train with a friend of mine, Sam Wiener from Buffalo. And we were, this size. And we stop at a station. Two soldiers were sitting, and we understand a little German because of our Yiddish. One German said to the other, laughingly, "Oh, small Jewish soldiers." My buddy Sam Wiener was tougher than I was. He took his club, whacked him at the back of the head. I think he died on the train, spread it. And that was our first association with German prisoners till we got to El Paso. We saw them into their compound and we went back. All right. Do you have something you would like to ask me, Alice?
Yes. When did you get to Europe?
We were in Fort Dix and were told it was August 1 year to the time we were in Fort Dix. I was now 43. It was August 1943.
Right.
We walked up the battle to our ship. It was a small liner. And we were part of a convoy of about 80 ships, very large convoy. From the minute we got on the ship, we started with the what they call the tin cans that blew up for submarines. We took off. We didn't know where we were going. Every hour there were the ash cans dropping to ward off submarines. And the entire convoy, you can imagine the noise continuously. It was maybe 70 or 80 ships dropping the ash cans for the submarines. We got to the Mediterranean. We went through the Mediterranean, and that's when we learned we were going to Oran, North Africa. We were on the ship 20 days, which was a pretty horrible 20 days. We were told when we landed in Mers el Kabir, the harbor of Oran, that we would be 3 hours before we disembarked. And the captain of the ship said he knew we were all hot and sweaty. If we would like to jump into the Mediterranean to cool off, we may. I want you to picture 100 soldiers, tall, short, fat, slim, dropping all their uniform and jumping into the Mediterranean. And then we came out and we were escorted to our compound in Oran.
So when was the first time that you were actually on the front lines?
Well, in Oran, we did a lot of duty pertaining to prisoners of war. We were taught how to handle them. One thing that happened in North Africa that was the most exciting part of my military career. We were told there's a big plane, an American plane coming in, and we were meeting with some very prestigious people. We would go to the airport at what was it? Le Prestige. It was the airport in Iran. We were waiting for this plane to come in. When the plane came in, we were told we will circle the plane with our weapons, one soldier facing in, one out. I happened to be in a very good position. As the plane landed, they pushed the seats up to the plane. A lot of generals came out of the plane. We didn't know why we were there. Then the next person to come off the plane was carried by 4 GIs in a wheelchair. Who do you think that was?
I can only imagine it was one of your greatest presidents.
That's President Roosevelt. He
Truman
came
wasn't
off.
bad either. Truman was pretty cool too, but carry on.
He was followed by Winston Churchill.
Wow.
Winston Churchill was followed by Dwight Eisenhower. There you have the 3 most important people in the world at that time coming off a plane. They got into the staff cars. I saluted President Roosevelt. I said, "Welcome to Iran, Mr. President." He gave me a salute back.
Wow.
And they all got into their staff cars and took off. Now, we didn't know where they were going. We knew it was very important for these 3 people to get off the plane. When they came back, they got back on the plane from their staff cars. The plane took off. We got into our 3.5-ton GMC, and the sergeant picked up the awnings that were covering the truck. He said, "We're going to stop someplace, and you will be amazed." The airport was right next to Mers el Kabir, which is the harbor of Algeria. He stopped the truck and said, "I want you to look out to see what's there." It was a German battleship with all the Nazi flags. Now, this was very unusual. We did not know why all this was taking place until we landed at our compound. The captain said, "You are all very interested, I'm sure, with what this was about." Eisenhower, Churchill, and Roosevelt were meeting with the German High Command. Now, the captain said he didn't know if Hitler knew what was going on. The German High Command hated Hitler. And they met with Roosevelt and Churchill and Eisenhower and offered the Americans a peace treaty without Russia. Well, of course, they refused it, and they went to their battleship and they took off. And that was a very exciting part of our trip to Oran, Africa. From Oran, Christmas Eve, 1943, we got on a British ship. We knew the only place we could go was Italy. And we took 7 days to Italy, and we landed in Italy New Year's Day. Okay, I'll sit still now while you have questions.
Well, I'm just reeling from the fact that you saw Churchill and Ike, obviously. What army were you attached to in Italy? Was it the 7th Army?
We landed, it was the 5th Army, General Mark Clark.
Right.
General Mark Clark was a wonderful man. He was not particularly liked by generals like Patton. Mark Clark was a peacetime general. Patton wanted action. Patton used,
you're the first veteran I've actually spoken to that says good things about Mark Clark.
Oh, as I say, he was a peacetime general, and I'll give you an idea. We landed in Caserta. I don't know if you're familiar with Italy.
Sure.
Caserta was where King Emmanuel built his palace. It was the largest palace in Europe. And we landed there in Caserta on Passover. It was Easter Passover. Mark Clark said, for all of our Jewish soldiers, we are going to have a Seder. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. He said, we're going to have the largest Seder you will ever be at. There were 2,100 Jewish soldiers. We had 5 chaplains from all denominations at the Seder, and the food was brought in from Morocco, North Africa, which had a large Jewish population. It was Seder food, and the chaplains all said their thing, and it was really a very memorable time.
Were you ever worried about being captured yourself by the Germans, given the fact that you are Jewish?
Well, we met, of course, the Germans that we met were prisoners of war. And we had no fear. We were taught how to, we had many Germans in our battalion that came over from Germany in 1938. Those that could afford it were sent to America, and we had a large German population in our community. And our battalion, we were taught how to interpret the German philosophy. The Germans that we had in our unit interrogated the prisoners, and we asked them the questions we wanted to ask them, and that's the way we learned their outfits, their units, and that's the Germans that we met.
You did a wonderful interview with Friends, and I wanted to bring up a couple of things that you mentioned. First of all, I want to point out to everybody that your unit was attached to the 36th Infantry Division, the 34th. No, this is. Can you tell us who you were attached to then? Which
yes.
division?
The 36th Division were. My heart goes out when I speak about them, because we first met them in France, and they were next to the 45th Division. The 45th Division was a Texas division, and the 36th Infantry and the 45th, my heart goes out when I speak them, because they were the frontline brunt of the American Army. And we were very close to them. As they took a small town in France, we moved in right after them. Maybe an hour after they moved in, we moved in and set up military government. And we did various jobs. You know, I can, if you would like, Max, I have here my discharge, And I'm going to have my grandson Michael, who's been wonderful, read it. My eyes are getting very bad. Would you like to hear that the duties we had?
Sure, absolutely, definitely.
Okay. It says military policemen performed traffic control and maintained traffic order in Germany and France and Italy, interrogated different prisoners of war of their duties and which military installations they were part of. As we walked into the villages, we protected the villages. I was in a squad that did not go into the military government part of it. We went into the towns and surveyed the towns to make sure there were no Germans there. And that was part of our military duty. So I thought you would like to hear that.
Thank you very much, sir. For the benefit of viewers, I just want to give a brief chronological picture of your movements. So Sicily invaded July 1943, Salerno, southern Italy, September 1943. You arrived at the end of 1943, and Italy with Mark Clark's Fifth Army in that terrible, brutal mountain warfare. And then you arrived in France as part of Operation Dragoon on the 15th of August, 1944, one of the most successful amphibious operations of the war. And then you were with the 7th Army, Alexander Patch's 7th Army.
Yes, when we landed in France, we were the 7th Army. What was the general there?
Alexander Patch was your big boss. He was the 7th Army commander.
And as we went northwest, we were told when we get to Nancy, a town above Paris, we would become part of Patton's 3rd Army. That was the first time and only time I heard Patton speak. Now, of course, when the scuttlebutt got around, General Patton was going to speak. Anyone that could get away from their unit went. And this is the way he started. Remember the movie Patton?
Absolutely. I think we've all seen it several times.
Pat made sure everyone saw his pistols. They were pearl-handled, beautiful pistols. And the way he started to speak to the soldiers at large, I'm here to greet you, son of a bitches. But remember, you are my son of a bitches, which was an endearment to him. And we all felt endeared to him. And he spoke for about 15 minutes. And we felt very honored that Patton was talking. And we were getting ready to go through Paris. Then it came, when it got to Paris, he wanted it to be the first American soldier entering Paris. But Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, said, I've got to give this honor to, what was the general, the French general, de Gaulle.
Well, Leclerc
de Gaulle had to be the first one to enter Paris. And that was the correct way to go. And Patton agreed. As much as I would like to be the first one to enter, de Gaulle should be the first French soldier to enter Paris. And he did, and we followed de Gaulle. Okay.
When you saw Patton speaking, did he use any other rich language apart from SOB? I'm sure he used more words than that.
Well, he used real army language. He used, and the soldiers loved him. They all cheered. they loved his language. And I read his autobiography. It was very sad. He wanted to be shot by the last bullet and the last soldier to leave World War II. Unfortunately, you know the way he died, in an automobile accident. And he said enough there. He was very, very saddened that this is the way he died. And he used to talk. His grandfather, his father was a general in World War I. His great-grandfather was a general in the Mexican-American War. And he became, Patton was known as the wealthiest soldier in World War II. He had all the property that his father and grandfather accumulated from the war.
So you served in your unit attached to the 5th Army, the 7th Army, and Patton's 3rd Army. Are
Correct.
you proud of being one of Patton's boys? Does that make you feel proud?
We were very proud. Unfortunately, when we went into Germany, I was wearing the 7th Army patch. They said I had to wear the 7th Army patch because that was really the way we started. And we, at the Battle of the Bulge, remember the Battle of the Bulge, we were called upon to wait in reserve. They wanted any soldier that could come immediately. We were about 2 miles outside of the Bulge, waiting to be called in. Fortunately, the weather broke, and the American Air Force could go in and help Patton. And Patton was waiting with his tank corps to enter the Bulge, and thank God he took part. About 7 days later, we were told we were going to enter Germany following Patton. We went over the river there.
Rhine.
All the bridges, the Rhine, all the bridges had been knocked out, of course. And there was a company with what do they call the little pontoons? They put together pontoons to create a bridge. And that's the way we went into Germany. And we went through Germany, and thank God, the war ended in April, was it? I believe.
Early May 1945.
Yes. And we had enough points to go home. And we were happy that they put us on a truck, my unit, and they shipped us back through France to Le Havre. And we went into a campaign and waiting for a boat to take us home. So and fortunately, we were on we came to the Africa in a small boat, but we went back in a French cruise ship that was converted into a troop ship. And I remember the first sight we saw. Have you ever been to Coney Island, Max?
Max is with us, but I've not been to Coney Island, no.
No. The first sight, you're on a boat, you see is the parachute drop in Coney Island. And that really was a very memorable. We got into Camp Kilmer, New Brunswick, which was an hour away from my father's farm. All we could see was getting out of Camp Kilmer. We were told The next day we will be discharged and given our freedom and a truck home. But we could not wait for the next day. I hadn't seen my mother and father in over 3 years. And that's what we wanted to see. In Camp Kilmer, there was a large fence around the camp, but GIs didn't wait for an opening. They created a big hole in the fence, and we put our gear in our barracks, and we knew one thing: we got to get out of camp. And we went through the hole in the gate, and I went out to the road to hitchhike. I lived in the place, Tom's River. It was a beautiful little town. My father had his chicken farm there. And the first car that saw me stopped. "Soldier, where are you going?" I said, it was a man and a woman, elderly. I said, "We just docked this morning and I've got to get to see my mother and father." I said, "Take me as far as you're going and you'll leave me off. I appreciate it." So the woman said, "Soldier, we're taking you right to your house."
Wow.
She was emotional. Okay, I get a little emotional when I speak of it. She took us right to my father's farm. And they knew that our boat had come in, and they expected me to call. So I heard my sister Mickey yelling, "Mama, Philly is here." My mother came out of the kitchen in her apron. I knew I was home then. She says, "Go call Papa. He's taking a nap." I'm sorry if I get a little emotional.
Oh, no, please. I'm getting emotional. Carry on.
So my father came out and he saw me. And he walked toward me. I walked toward him. And he gave me a hug. My father was from Russia, where they're fighting now in the Ukraine. He was from a town called Barbarsk. And that's where the battle is taking place right now. The Russians are fighting the Czechoslovakian. So we had the neighbors all came running out when they saw me there. And there was a group of neighbors. And my father said, "I don't understand. I sent away a skinny little chicken farmer, and they sent me back a man."
So you weren't court-martialed for going AWOL then? That wasn't a problem?
No, we went AWOL once.
Right. You mentioned in your interview.
Let me go back a little bit to Italy.
Okay, carry on.
When we landed in Naples, I had a friend, Phil Alberico and John DeMonico, two Italian boys. And he always said, "I've got my grandparents' address in Naples. When we land in Naples, I'm going to take off." So they told us we had 3 hours before we can be picked up. He said, "Come on, Phil." So I went with Phil and John DeMarco. We get into Naples. It was maybe 5 minutes away from the port. And of course, he's asking people, "Do you know this address? Where these people are?" They said, "I know the address, but there will be no people there that you know. Everyone disappeared when Naples was being bombed." And that's when we got back to camp. They already had picked up our barracks bags, and the soldiers were marching to camp. It was a tented camp. We get there. We said if we wait for them to pick up the barracks bags, we'll get to camp. We got to camp. We had a first sergeant. He was a regular Army. We get there, and they say you've got to go into the first sergeant's office. The first thing he says is stand up and say move. He says, you know, AWOL is punishable by death. We're shivering, the three of us. But Barkin was a regular Army first sergeant. He said, we each were private first class. He comes over to us like in the movies and rips off our stripes and says, you know you're going to have KP for a week. Who cared? And that was the end of that solution. What would you like to hear?
Well, I wanted to go back to the war itself. What was the most disturbing thing that you experienced? I know that you said you saw at one point body bags of young Americans.
That had to be the most disturbing thing. We landed in Italy, and we were in a convoy, and we would stop because we were going to the next town, which was Monte Cassino. You've heard of that?
Yes, definitely. Yep.
That's where they had the, on top of the casino, they had the monks, very, very old, and Eisenhower didn't want to bomb it. And soldiers were being killed left and right because it was difficult to go up the side of a mountain if they're dropping bombs down on you. But the sight of bags like sacks of potatoes being waited to be picked up by Graves registration, that was a very disturbing sight to us. And we had a colonel. He was the head of the Maine State Police, and he was given the battalion because there were no commanders yet to take over battalions and companies. We were all there. And he was a cuckoo bird. He said, I want my battalion to take Mount Cassino. Mark Clark said, no, sir. It's got to be taken by soldiers that are trained to take. But General Eisenhower said, we cannot permit this many deaths. And he gave orders to bomb Monte Cassino, the Abbey. There was an abbey that the soldiers were, and once they bombed the abbey, the soldiers were able to land. We had paratroopers dropping in on it, and that was really the first sight of real war that we saw.
Well, what you saw was complete devastation. The abbey was completely destroyed.
Yes.
The friends are actually going to go on a trip to Italy this October, and we'll actually be going to Monte Cassino. And I don't know whether you know this, you probably do, but the abbey has been beautifully restored. You wouldn't know that it had been bombed. It's incredible.
Yes, of course. They made sure of that. Yeah. Now we landed, being we were going north in Italy, the Germans were not that interested in Italy. And the Italian soldiers were very happy to be captured. They didn't want to even fight. We were about 4 miles south of Rome on June 5th. And they gave us a battalion of Italian prisoners. We were unloading freight cars with ammunition and shells and artillery shells. We were told something is going to take place. and we had the Italian prisoners taken off all the artillery shells, and the soldiers didn't know what was going on. We were told something is going to take place in the next day. June 5th, the day before they landed in France, the artillery and the tanks started a barrage. Italy is not that wide. It's like New Jersey, about 38 miles wide at that point. And the next day, June 6th, we landed in Italy. We crossed into, the park is called Villa Borghese. I don't know if you have, it's like Central Park in New York. And we ran into Villa Borghese. The Italian troops were happy to become prisoners. They didn't want to fight. And we went north, and June 6th was the invasion of France, and June 6th was the day that we landed in Rome. So that was an interesting calamity.
Let's go further towards the end of the war. What was the hardest period of your time in service during World War II? What was the hardest period?
My hardest feeling?
The hardest time. What was the most difficult period during that long 3 years?
Well, I would say the most difficult period was in France, because we were minutes behind the 36th Division, the 45th Division, and we saw artillery. That was the worst that we saw. We saw no direct infantry, because when the 36th Division and the 45th went in, they were hardened troops at this time, and the Germans didn't put up that much resistance when they came. But we saw artillery could have been from 20 miles away landing among us, and that was about the worst of it.
Where were you at the end of the war? Where were you at the end of the war?
The end of the war, we were in Germany. We were in Germany until November 1st. We had gone through many towns. We set up military government almost immediately. We were waiting for the regular government to come in and relieve us. And we kept going from town to town. And the Germans, per se, they were not that hostile toward us. Once the troops left, there was one interesting in Germany. I was with a friend of mine. I was a jeep driver, and he had a machine gun. And we were doing a little forwards, just viewing what was going on. We're going down a road. Sam Marina says, "Phil, do you see what I see?" I say, "It looks like a lot of Germans coming toward us." 2 white flags. We saw, it must have been a German division giving it. They were all surrendering at that point. So we go up in our Jeep, and the first thing Sam says, "Get the pistols, the Lugers." The Luger was the most exciting thing a veteran could get as a souvenir. We drove them back into camp, and we kept our guns. And they held them prisoners. About 10 minutes later, the first sergeant calls us both in. He says, the two captains of the German surrender are looking for their pistols. They want to surrender them to a captain, at least, not two soldiers. He says, if I don't see the pistols in 5 minutes on my desk, you're going to have a little trouble. Well, of course, we gave them back their pistols, and that was that. And that was the end of the German occupation for us. We enjoyed it because Germany itself was a pretty country. And the people that we came in touch with were kind to us. And that was the end of our occupation of Germany. That was exactly 2.5 years after we landed.
So at the end of the war in Germany, did you ever ask yourself, why on earth were we fighting these people, so many of whom were related to Americans? Did you ever think to yourself, why did we have to do this?
Yeah, well, do you know what I heard, which was very important? When Japan surrendered, MacArthur, if you can get hold of his speech, it's beautiful. The one thing I remember him saying is, we've got to remember a different way of solving our problems, because the next war will be the end of civilization. That was his speech.
I'm going to put this to you, sir. First of all, thank you so much for your service and being with us today. How do you react to this? In 1945, the United States was the most respected it has ever been in its entire history. Are you proud of the fact that you played a role in making this country the most respected?
We were very proud that when our company marched onto the platform going onto the ship, there was an army band playing over there. And it gave you a little chill to walk on listening to the army band. But you were very proud. All the draftees, we used to sit around in the evening and discuss the day we just went through. And the one thing you heard was proudness to be there.
We have a really nice question from a friend of mine, Robin. I should point out that her father was in an artillery unit with the 45th Thunderbird Division, to which you were attached, I know. And she's saying, amazing story. I think everybody, several comments here saying what an amazing storyteller you are. And she adds, what an honor to hear your story. What was life like for you when you came home? What was life like for you when you got back to the United States?
Well, as I said, firstly, I was very excited to see my mother and father. It was over 3 years, and we were a close family. And I didn't want to take my uniform off for 1 week. I was very proud to walk around, to go into town with it. And the thing that bothered me later on, and to this day, if I speak to young people, many of them don't even know there was a Second World War. And that is the sad part of it. But listen, we have enough sadness to go around now.
When you look back on your time in the Second World War, what's your happiest memory? What's the thing that you look back on and makes you smile most?
Well, I smile when we went through Paris, the first thing boys would yell, "Let's go for an eclair." They didn't even know what eclairs were. It's funny. You know what I wanted to show you? Where's that medal, Rob, Michael? Oh, and I'm going back 6 years now that the French government decided they wanted to give medals to anyone that was in France in 1944 to show their appreciation. It was a little late, but there were 8 of us in South Florida that received what's called the French Legion of Honor. Have you ever heard of it?
Absolutely, yes.
All right. Napoleon, now when I received the medal, I have pictures inside of the French ambassador pinning it on. They give you a little history. You now belong to a club that Napoleon was the first member of. And they gave us they gave us medals.
Wow, look at that. Can you hold it up more?
Yeah. Oops, okay. Here, let me show the medal itself. Do you see it?
Yeah, hold it just up a little bit higher. Look at that. That's amazing. Thank you.
And there were 8 of us, and there were veterans there that had terrific wounds. And I'm just amazed that there are so little veterans left. I think I heard they were dying at the rate of 1,000 a week.
Actually, I was at the memorial a week or 2 ago, and someone told me that knew the statistics that there are around about 130,000 of you still alive. So
is that what it is? Yes.
From 16 million who served in uniform in World War II, we're now down to 130,000 of you. I wanted to say we have to draw to an end, unfortunately, but I wanted to say that, you can tell I've got a little bit of a limey accent, a bit of a British accent. I've spent half my life in the US and half my life in England. I consider myself to be a little bit European. And I wanted to say on behalf of Europeans, thank you for everything that you did to give Europe almost 8 decades of peace, mostly prosperity and democracy. I can't thank you enough. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift that you've given.
Thank you. That's really a pleasure to hear. One moment I'll take, I think, when we were in Italy, we were next to the British 8th Army. They were incredible. I tell you, we spent a lot of time with the British 8th Army. For some reason, our battalion were with them wherever they went. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they would stop for tea. And that was really funny. But they couldn't get sugar. So I had a friend, Solkowski. There you go. Solkowski loved the beer. They were issued rations of beer and whiskey according to their rank. Okay? So we would take sugar out of the mess hall, and we would meet the British 8th wherever they were, trade them off sugar for beer and whiskey. Oh, they loved that sugar.
Well, I'm going to raise my cup of tea to you, sir, in your honor. I wanted to thank you so much for your time. You've been amazing. We've had so many comments saying just how incredible this experience has been for all of us. I think we all feel really honored and privileged to have been able to be with you this morning.